All right, we are on. I am here with Chris Gergen, the owner, CEO, and founder of Dark Horse Political and author of Win, the campaign strategy book that everybody needs to read if you want to win. If you don't want to win, don't worry about it. But how you doing, Chris?
I'm good, Richard. How are you?
Doing good. You're still in Vegas, right?
Absolutely, I'm still in Vegas.
Heck
It's
yeah.
the best city in the country. Best city in the
Well,
world.
I need to visit sometime.
You should. It's a lot of fun.
I'm in Camino Island. It's pretty cool over here, though.
Camino's a
So
beautiful place.
let's jump right into it. Biggest topic right now is our governor's race for the Republican Party. We
Mhm.
have what seems to be a two-way race between two Republicans that are running. We have Dave Reichert, Semi Bird, and then on the Democrat side, we've got three Democrats that are serious. I think that are still in. One is Bob Ferguson, who I think is the hands down favorite to win. Do you agree?
I would agree.
Yeah. And then we've got Mark Mullet, who is a senator right now in Olympia. I will have to look up the legislative district, but he's currently serving as a senator. I think he's more of a moderate candidate.
Yes. I
And
think it's
then
in the
we've got
fifth or something like that.
yeah, and then we've got Cassandra M. Hansen,
Never heard
and
of
who's
her.
also running as a Democrat. I haven't heard of her either. She's out of Spokane.
Yep.
Um, and then, of course, we have Dave Reichert, Semi Bird over here. Dave Reichert is
Mhm.
well known as a former congressman out of the 8th, and he's well known in King County. Semi Bird is a newcomer to the political scene. He was a member of a school board in Tri Cities. I think that's
Mhm.
his elected experience. So we'll jump right into the Republican side. I think we can make this quick and say we think Bob Ferguson's going to go ahead and pull out the Democratic nomination. Do you agree?
I would agree. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that there's any question of that. And Bob's got liabilities, obviously, especially for the general. But as far as the primary goes, I think that the Seattle vote is going to carry him over Mark and this other lady out of Spokane. I have never heard of, though her fundraising has been somewhat impressive for being a kind of a and
Yeah.
also ran that kind of threw her name in there, and she's done well for herself fundraising wise, which is really impressive.
Yeah. No, Mark Mullet, I think, has raised over $1 million.
Hmm.
And Bob Ferguson, what is he at now? 8? He's somewhere ridiculous.
Five, 6, 7, 8, something like that. It's a lot. There's a
Yeah.
lot of zeros. Let's put it that way.
Bob Ferguson's got a lot of zeros. But Cassandra Hansen, she's raised about $425,000.
Yes.
So that's pretty impressive for somebody I've never heard of.
Yep.
That's
Exactly.
and I think that just speaks to the large pool that Democrats have to pull from for fundraising here in Washington State.
Agreed.
They can afford to have a lot of people in their primary who bring in a lot of money to argue their point.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
if you look at there's two Democrats that are no longer in the race, Jay Inslee, obviously,
mhm,
and then you've got Hillary Franz, and both of them raised over $1 million, or
right,
maybe Hillary maybe raised 700,000. I'm not sure, but
right.
regardless, it's sizable amount of money, and so if you look at the total dollar amount that Democrats have raised versus Republicans, it's somewhat startling the difference.
Yep. Now, that's not to say anything negative about Dave Reichert's fundraising. I think
No,
he's at
not at all.
2.2 million. He's done
Yeah,
fine.
it's
He's
not
done
bad.
fine.
Mhm.
Yeah, not a bad day at the office. So I think at 2.2 million, that's a good place to be right now, especially for a Republican.
Yep,
Especially since none of the big interests have come in yet. I think
yep.
this came from over 10,000 individual donations,
Yeah.
which is good. That
Oh,
is
it's huge.
that shows a sign of support.
Mhm.
Most of these donations he has are not large donations; they're
Right.
under $500.
Yep.
So that means it's regular folks who are donating to the campaign.
Yes.
And then we have Semi Bird, and we have him at 424,000.
Yes. Roughly.
Um, he has spent 350,000, and
Roughly.
that is not counting what he's probably spent this month. And if he's on par with his previous spending, I think he'd probably be cash on hand somewhere around 50 grand.
Roughly. That's a guess.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I would say that's
So,
probably close.
well, let's say he spent nothing. He's at 70 grand.
Right.
Um,
Best case
so,
scenario.
best case scenario, 70 grand. So, What do you think right now of the Republican race? I remember we had spoken earlier, and you had said if Semi could turn things around in March for the fundraising, then things might change. Doesn't look like 70K is probably where he needs to be. So
Mm-hmm.
where do you see the primary going right now?
Well, I mean that's complicated, and you've got really two. You've got the regular folks, right? I mean, the ultimate poll is in August, and that's the one that
Mhm.
really matters, which is the election.
Right.
And then you've got the endorsement side with the delegates, and that's purely a partisan contest. And winning the MWSRP endorsement is a lot like winning the door prize at the Super Bowl, right? Doesn't really make a difference because the WSRP is not in any sort of condition or position to really lend any sort of help or credence or credibility to any candidate that is in the race, whether that's Reichert or whether that's Semi Bird or whether that's Lauren Culp or whether that's Richard McQuarrie or whether that doesn't make a difference who you were in that race. WSRP is not really in a position to lend any sort of credibility because the folks, the regular people, the people that are not involved in the party really don't care what the party has to think.
Mhm.
And they have, in my opinion, they have not over the last 4 years worked hard enough on brand rehab and establishing the brand as something that matters. And
Yeah. Now, talking about parties, local parties anyway, I think Dave Reichert right now, this is where Semi Bird has shined, actually.
mhm,
Semi Bird has gone out and reached out to the local parties, which is something I always tell people not to forget. Now, it's not the end all be all, as Lauren Culp proved in 2020. I think Joshua Freed got just about all of them.
uh-huh. I think you
Um,
got them all.
I think there was a few that abstained, just didn't want to endorse anybody till after the primary,
Sure.
and those were the few that didn't look silly
Right.
because the Joshua Freed got stomped.
Mm-hmm.
He got destroyed by Lauren Culp, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that was largely due to the fact that while Lauren Culp, we can say what we want about the campaign and how it ended up, but he did not forget his base.
That's right.
Um, he may have played to it too much, but he didn't forget them. And being able to go out there and talk to your base, which is the parties, I think the local parties
Mm-hmm.
probably represent your base. And he was able he's able to speak to him. Now it was a little bit different though because back then in 2020 the parties didn't really represent the base. They
Mm-hmm.
were kind of an old guard was in control of everything, and they
Mm-hmm.
went with somebody a little more well known like Joshua Freed because I had heard Joshua Freed's name before I heard
Mm-hmm.
Lauren Culp's name.
Yeah, he'd been
Um,
around for probably 10, 12 years.
yeah, and he was out of King County, and all the things that we
Mm-hmm.
say we think we need out of a candidate who's going to win is somebody who can do well in King County. He fit the
Mm-hmm.
bill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, but you know, this is the opposite. This time, Semi Bird has gotten 12, I think, county parties to endorse
Mm-hmm.
him,
Mm-hmm.
um, and Dave Reichert's sitting at 4.
Yeah.
Now, one of those parties is Pierce, so that's a big one. So that's
Mm-hmm.
good. But Semi Bird's got Snohomish, which is also a big one. So that kind of cancels it out. Spokane,
Right.
I think, with Semi.
Oh, very
The
much so.
Yeah, the only the counties that have gone right now for Dave Reichert are Pierce, Kitsap, San Juan, and San Juan, while I love them, does not have a population to make a difference in this race.
I'm going to give you some trivia. So Lauren Culp was the only gubernatorial candidate since I think the 1980s to ever go out to San Juan County and actually campaign. And we went up there not because we felt like we would win San Juan because it's extremely liberal,
Yeah.
but because we made a promise to the people that we would visit every single county.
And that's important. It is so
Yes, it
important
is.
to be accessible. Now, I will say, last time we spoke, I hadn't met Dave Reichert yet. Now I have
Mm-hmm.
met him. He did come to Island County for so the party endorsed Semi Bird. The Island County
Right.
Republican Party endorsed Semi Bird, which is fine.
Mm-hmm.
But a little, I won't say a splinter group because it's not a splinter group. Another PAC calling itself GOP of Island County set up an event, and they had Dave Reichert there, and it was a pretty good event. I think probably around 87 people showed up.
Nice.
And Dave Reichert did well. He's a good speaker. He's not as lively, though, I will say, as Semi Bird.
Sure.
When Sesame Bird speaks, people get ginned up, people get excited. When Dave Reichert
Mhm.
speaks, people are like, yeah, no, everything he says is making perfect sense. We need to do that. But
Right.
that's about what you get.
Right.
So, it's a slight difference in enthusiasm. Now, I think I could be totally wrong. Watch me be wrong. But I think from contacting people, it is extraordinarily likely that Semi Bird will get the delegates necessary to win the endorsement. He's spoken at most of the events. I think he's got people who've spoken to most of the delegates, and I think Semi
Mhm.
Bird is poised to get 58 to 60%. Um,
Right.
and so, assuming Semi Bird does win the Washington State Republican Party endorsement that's coming up, because this is a new thing. We've never done this before. We've
Yeah.
never done party endorsements before primary, and I think the
Mhm.
goal of this was to get everyone behind one candidate early, as opposed to waiting till August and then only having a month and a half before ballots roll out.
Right.
Um, so, assuming Semi Bird wins this, I think we both agree. Tell me if I'm wrong. Dave Reichert will not drop out.
No.
Yeah, no, he's
Why
not
would
going to
he?
drop out and get behind
No.
Semi. No, not at
No, he's
two
got
point
the
two million.
RGA behind him. He's got, $2 million in the bank. He's got thousands of more contributors than Semi Bird. There's
Mm-hmm.
no real reason for Dave to even worry about, the delegate count with the WSRP.
Yeah. So now let's assume here we are. Semi Bird wins the WSRP nomination. I know there are some people who believe once Semi Bird wins the nomination, WSRP is going to donate money to his primary campaign. And some
Mhm.
people have even said they think the RNC will come in and spend money against the RGA and support a Semi Bird. None of
No,
that's going to happen.
no, because the RGA has more money than the RNC does.
Yeah. And
And the
also the
RNC
RNC
is
and RGA
responsible for
wouldn't fight
winning the
each other.
White House, and they don't give a crap about. I'm sorry, I'm going to keep it G-rated for you, I promise.
Yeah.
But they really don't give a crap about Washington State. The
No.
RNC could care less. They're worried about Washington D.C.,
Yeah.
where it really matters, which is the White House, because we can't have Biden or Harris or whom fill in the blank Newsom right in the White House in 2024. We just can't.
Right. There's only two races in Washington State that the RNC might, and probably won't, but might be interested in, and that's the 8th congressional district, and that's the 3rd congressional district. With
And yeah,
um, and that's it, because they only care
and,
about DC.
and those are the NRCC is, and not even the RNCs. The RNC
Mm-hmm.
doesn't care. They're gonna. That is all the NRCC. So anybody that
Yeah.
thinks that the RNC gives a crap about Washington, you're wrong. I'm just going to tell you you're wrong. I love you. We can go hold hands and run through the meadows if you want to, but you're wrong. Okay. The RNC
um,
does not care at all about this race. They don't care about what happens to Washington State. It's a blue state. And until Washington citizens and Washington conservatives turn it purple, then they're not going to care. Once it turns
yeah.
purple, then they'll start to care. But as long as it's as deep blue as it is, the RNC doesn't care. The RGA sees this as a possible upset race, and so they're interested. And the only reason they're interested is because there's so few. I think there's 3 in the country that are considered at the gubernatorial level are considered possible upset races, and they feel like Reichert, with his record in Congress and his record as sheriff, and the longevity that he has had in the public eye in Washington State, they feel like, and also where he is on the issues, they feel like he's best suited. Whether you agree with it or not, okay. If you disagree with that assessment, that's fine. You can disagree, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree with you if you disagreed. However, the reality is that is their perception of it, and that's why they're interested in Dave and not in Semi. They don't know anything
Right.
about Semi. When I talked to these people in 2020, they didn't know anything about Lauren. They didn't want anything to do with Washington State. They'd lost $20 million between Rossi Part 1, Rossi Part 2, and McKenna, and they had no appetite. And I will say I am a little surprised and somewhat encouraged that the RGA has some money to spend against Ferguson, because at the end of the day, you guys that live up there in Washington State, you cannot have Bob Ferguson.
No, we can't.
You just can't.
That That is a man who has turned the office of Attorney General into a political pulpit. Meanwhile, and this has been proven. I think we are number one in car thefts in the nation.
Mm-hmm.
We are number one in property crimes.
Mm-hmm.
We have seen a 96% increase in murder. In this, we're not number one in murder, thank God.
Right.
I don't even think we're number two, but we've seen a huge increase.
Right.
Our attorney general could play a role in limiting that stuff, but instead we've got an attorney general who is more interested in suing conservatives than he is in encouraging local prosecutors to enforce the law. He's more interested in suing the voters of Washington State when they voted for $30 car tabs. And I'm not saying $30 car tabs was a well thought out idea or not. I think we voted for it.
Doesn't make a difference. It was the will of the people.
The will of the people. And he argues to his favorite judge, well, the people were confused. And they overturned it. Right. They overturned the will of the people because we were confused. Right. Well, if you're too confused when you're voting, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I don't know what to tell you. You voted. Don't vote if you're confused. So, I mean, but we weren't confused. Everybody knew what they were voting for. And if there were a few people who didn't, I'm sorry. But since it's a secret ballot, or it's supposed to be, we have no idea how you voted anyway. So I don't know how we had any plaintiffs in that.
Right.
But yeah, that's Bob Ferguson. He will overturn the will of the people when he doesn't like the will of the people. He will use his office as a political pulpit to bludgeon his opponents.
Of course.
He will focus on Washington, D.C., not Washington State, because I guarantee you governor is not the last place he wants to go. He has another place he wants to go. Right. And I think we know what it is. I'm not going to say he's going to do that yet because I haven't heard anything about it, but I would be shocked if Bob Ferguson doesn't make a bigger run than governor if he gets elected as governor.
The ceiling for him would be maybe U.S. Senate.
Yeah, I don't see him becoming a president. I don't even think he'd win the Democratic nomination.
No,
but
he wouldn't even he wouldn't break 1% nationally.
Well, neither did Jay Inslee, so I expect he'd probably do about as well.
Right.
So, but that's who we've got. Somebody who's very unfriendly to the military, someone who's very unfriendly to victims. He supports many criminals. There was one example, I forget her name, but she was out of Spokane. She was the most prolific child sex offender in history. The most prolific female child sex offender in history, out of Spokane. And he fought to have her released, not to keep her in, to have her released. I don't know if she's reoffended. Maybe she hasn't. But the point that is where his head's at.
It's disgusting.
If you were an attorney general, is the forefront of your mind, how can I let this child offender get out?
Well, it shouldn't be. And I think it speaks towards his motivations. Clearly his motivations are not to make Washington State the best state in the union.
No,
it's not to make Washington communities the safest communities in the country. It's not to make sure that Washington citizens are the safest citizens in the country.
Yeah, and that's apparent by the numbers that we're number one in some of the smaller crimes. Murder has almost doubled. And we're not number one in murder, but we're worse off than we were when he took office.
Right.
Do you remember when we were running Lauren Culp's campaign, the Chop Chaz thing? In Seattle, and they tried to set a police station on fire.
I think they did set a police station on fire.
They did set a police station on fire, attempted to trap them in and kill them all.
Yeah, I think that was the 3rd precinct.
Yeah, and Bob Ferguson, total silence.
Mm-hmm.
Total silence.
Mm-hmm. Jay Inslee was total silence.
Yeah.
Summer of love. Mostly peaceful protest.
Yeah, right. So I just I can't wrap my head around the idea of Bob Ferguson being our next governor, and it's not just because he's a Democrat. I mean, yes, I have different politics than Bob Ferguson. I'm a Republican, but I think he's just bad at his job.
I think it's deeper than that, in my opinion, Richard. And Jay Inslee is clearly intellectually challenged, which is a nice way of saying he's stupid.
Right.
Everyone knows it. It's the joke around Olympia. Anybody that knows him or been around him knows that he's dumb, and he's not the brightest candle on the cake. He's never been. And there are a lot of people in the political space on both sides of the aisle in Washington State that are somewhat dumbfounded at how someone like him could have ascended so high in the political space. But Bob Ferguson is a little different. Bob is smart, and I think Bob is Machiavellian. Bob has this evil edge to him that is Machiavellian, and that he is scheming, and that he comes with bad intentions.
Yep.
Whereas Jay Inslee's just dumb and does what he's told and does what Lori Jenkins and the other leader in the Senate tell him to do. And the bottom line for him is he wants deals to get done, and he wants to have as easy of a life as possible. And they're going to run the progressive agenda because they can. And as long as he continues to sign his name on the dotted line on all these stupid bills that they keep sending to the mayor's or the governor's mansion, then they don't have any problem keeping him in power. But Bob is different. He is cut from a completely different cloth. That guy is Machiavellian. And, and I don't say that in a rhetorical sense. I mean this quite literally. There's something wrong with him. And, Washington citizens cannot, under any circumstance, regardless of where you fall in the political spectrum, you absolutely cannot have someone who is fundamentally a Machiavellian type person or a Machiavellian character running the show, because what ends up happening is you end up with a tyrant.
And a little proof that there's a little bit of tyranny being planned right now. Did you know that the chair of the Washington State Democrats was recently quoted as saying, "We need to get supermajorities in both the House and the Senate so that way we can clean up the Washington State Constitution."
Yeah, I know. I heard that. Yeah, that's their intention. And, which is maybe is a good dovetail for us into the state of the Republican caucus in the House and the Republican caucus in the Senate. Mm-hmm. The bottom line is, J.T. Wilcox is not there anymore. He was the former leader of the Republican caucus. And under his leadership, when he took over, there were 48 members of his caucus. Today, there are 40, right? Yep. And his deputy leader, Kretz, and his other leader, the lady in the she's running in the 5th congressional. I don't even remember her name. Between the three of them, they completely destroyed the Republican caucus because they spent more time cleaning out conservatives that they didn't like than they did actually building the caucus and running races that are winnable races and developing things on the ground, developing candidates.
Yeah. Now, and one of them was Sutherland, who lost to Sam Lowe. There was no reason for us to have that primary, but they made sure that they pushed a Republican against a Republican so that they could get the one Christian conservative we had left out of there. Which,
they did the same thing to Rob Chase with Lowell Christensen over in Spokane. Mm-hmm. Now, to Lowell's credit, he's voted fairly conservative in the House since his time, right? And that's not a dig on Lloyd. He wanted to run, and he ran, and he had the support of the folks in Olympia to do it. So kudos on him. He ran a better race, and he won.
And same with Sam Lowe. I'm not taking a dig at Sam Lowe. He wanted to run. He ran. He won. But the point that T.J. Wilcox was more focused on those races than he wasn't getting Democrats out of office, because I didn't see T.J. Wilcox one time up here in the 10th, which is one of the battlegrounds. This is one of the battlegrounds.
Right.
Up here in the 10th, fighting to get Dave Paul out of office.
Yeah.
He wasn't here. Karen Lesetmo went to him a few times, but he never came up here to assist in the campaigning because he didn't seem to care. But he was definitely there for Sam Lowe to get rid of Sutherland.
Well, yeah, and he had he had Chad Minnick running that other race that you just mentioned.
Yeah, Lesetmo's.
Yeah, and and so there's just the insider group, and it's this whole thing is falling apart, and you notice the leadership in the House decided to get off the ship that they knew was sinking. That way, different people can take the blame for it.
Well, you and me can make sure that that doesn't happen, because we're going to remember
Sure.
who it was that put us in the situation.
Yep.
And we hopefully will encourage and help any new leadership in fixing it, because we've got a lot of fixing to do, and we need to do it quickly.
Yeah.
Because we are dangerously close to a supermajority by Democrats.
That's a fact, and I think the very first step is one that I was involved in the last couple of weeks or a couple of weeks ago rather, when I was there in Washington State. Is I went to several of the different stakeholders throughout the state, people that I had not necessarily been on the same page with, or that had not been on the same page with me, and said, hey, listen, we've got a couple choices here. We can continue to fight each other, and we can see Bob Ferguson become governor, and we can see the Democrats take majorities in the House and the Senate, or maybe we can just put down our swords and we can agree that probably that the candidates that we're respectively going to support maybe aren't exactly what we want, but we're not going to fight amongst each other, and we're going to work together to elect Republicans.
Yeah.
And that's really what has to happen. There has to be a peace, and we have to quit this bomb throwing.
And there should be peace. Honestly, there's very few Republicans that I actually am really angry at. I mean, I think TJ has done a terrible job.
JT, not TJ. JT Wilcox.
Oh, did I say TJ? Sorry. Yeah, no, JT Wilcox has done a terrible job of keeping our house in order, because he's lost. I think you said he's -8 in the House, right?
Yep.
All said and done, -8.
Mm-hmm.
And we're in bad shape. And if the Democrats do take a supermajority, they have said it openly, they're going to clean up the Constitution. Notice she didn't say exactly what they wanted to clean up.
Sure.
I'll tell you what, if I wanted to make a change in the Constitution, I'd be very open about what it was I wanted to change, because I think it'd be popular.
What do you think the chances are that gun rights is going to be one of those things that they clean up?
Yeah, the gun rights, because in Washington State, gun rights are more protected actually in our Constitution than federally. And Correct. Also another thing that they're going to clean up for certain is the income tax, because that's been an annoyance to them, which is why they've created a loophole that allows them to tax your income for assisted living that you're never going to see, right, for a grand total of $36,000. If you put in $700,000, you get $36,000, which is about 3 months of support. So it's a tax. It is an income tax that they managed to get through.
That's 3 months support at the lowest level.
Yeah, now, today.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm ready to get in there in the retirement home, it's going to be a half a month.
I mean, well, if it's any consolation, if you want, I can just throw you off the roof if you get to that point. That way you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, no, I think that would save money. That's a good idea. Thank you, Chris. Let's put us down for that. But yeah, no. But real quick, so we're going to have to wrap it up, because I know you've got other obligations, and I appreciate you being here. I did want to ask you. So we were talking about the local governor's race, state of the Republican Party. Semi Bird, if he gets the endorsement, which I think is the likely thing that's going to happen, if he gets the endorsement of the delegation, is it going to help him raise money?
No.
Okay, so he's still going to have money issues. It might give him a little bounce that month, right? People will be like, "Oh, Semi Bird, okay," so he might get some donations.
No. If the party was relevant, then maybe, but the party doesn't have any money to give him, right? All the party's money is in their FEC account, right? And they've got operations and they've got different things that they've got to cover. They have no interest in giving Semi Bird any money. And not when Dave Reichert is the guy with $2 million in the bank, and they've got Bob Ferguson chomping at their heels. Why would they give any money to Semi Bird?
Well, yeah, and I think they are more focused on the federal races. I think Jim Walsh has set the agenda that it would be really good if the Republican Party could flip the 8th and flip the 3rd. And
well, of course, a credible they've got Carmen Goers, who's a super nice lady.
Mm-hmm.
She's running the 8th. I'm not really seeing what she's doing though. Right.
She's not raising any money.
So that's going to be a heavy lift. If you're going to beat Kim Schreier, then you got to go hard, you got to go deep, and you got to raise a lot of money. Statistically, she's going to need to raise $3.5, maybe $4 million in that race if she's going to be competitive and actually, pull out a victory.
Yeah,
Um,
Matt Larkin had a lot more money at this point. I think he had a lot more name
yeah,
recognition, and he's very well liked in the Republican Party. He's not
so did
considered an
Reagan
ultra.
Dunn. Reagan Dunn had more money, and so did the other gentleman whose his name escapes me right now.
Jenkins, Jesse
Yeah,
Jensen.
Jesse Jensen. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
they all had more money than what Carmen's got right now at
yeah.
this point in the race, and so
So
it's going to
why
be
do you
tough.
think the money's drying up on every race? I'm seeing that. I'm noticing that on every race, the money's drying up. Here in the 10th, by the way, one of the battlegrounds where we're supposed to be picking up seats, we have one Democrat running unopposed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's
So
happening?
so I think that there's a couple reasons. Number one, the economy, it's tough.
Mhm.
And then so that's and I say that because fundraising. So I don't just work in Washington State. I work in a lot of different places, and that's pretty much across the board. What we're seeing is that fundraising is being sucked up at the presidential level, and at other federal levels, and also the economy. So uh, uh, then the next thing is that in Washington State, in particular, um, why would you give in Washington State? I mean, we're talking about our narrative is it's rigged. Okay, it's rigged. So what follows? Why vote?
Right? I mean, and that's
So
exactly.
why give?
I think we've got to get away from that
Well,
whole "it's
it's
rigged."
stupid. So
It
is it
is so
rigged?
dumb.
Okay, yeah, it might be rigged. It is rigged, right? But so you're just going to stay home? So why do we even have elections? Why are we doing any of this?
I mean, encouraging people not to vote, and I'll tell you, some people have been even saying that they think, if there's no point in voting because the Democrats have a secret machine that's gonna. I'll tell you what, that's probably the dumbest thing that we could start selling to people, because if we do that, it's going to encourage them to stay home and not donate. And then guess what? You are
We
going
end
to
up in the
lose.
situation that we're in now.
We're going to
And
have candidates who don't run because they know their voters aren't going to vote because they think it's a rigged thing. So we've got
if
to get away from that, guys. We can win elections. We have won elections.
yep,
Um,
if 100% of Republican voters turned out, and the Dems were still rigging things, and it makes it incredibly difficult to commit fraud on a large scale.
yeah,
It
and
makes it
and I
incredibly difficult to do that if you're voting anywhere 80, 90, 100%.
yeah, and
Incredibly difficult.
I can tell you, we do have some good auditors in Washington State. We have some
Some
really good auditors in Washington State,
we got
and
some bad ones.
I've done, yeah. Well, we've
King
got some
County.
bad everything. Yeah, King County. Come on.
Yeah.
I mean, like we've got, but we've got people, and I've actually sat in at these elections. Um, if you think fraud is happening behind closed doors, it's not. If there is any, it's people who are turning in ballots that shouldn't be allowed to vote, who are registered to vote.
Mm-hmm.
In this state, that is a possibility, because I'll tell you one thing that they need to get rid of. They need to get rid of being able to print out a ballot online and turn it in, because there is a way for you to print out my ballot.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And so
And
what
if
if I
I'm
write an algorithm? What if I write an algorithm to print all the low propensity voters ballots and vote them?
that would be bad, and it'd be hard to
It'd be bad.
prove that
It'd be
that it
hard to
wasn't
prove
done.
because the low propensity voters don't care.
Right. And so what? And I think there's some things that our Secretary of State needs to do, and we had the Secretary of State position for a while, and nothing was
Mm-hmm.
done.
Yep.
That they could do to at least assure people, hey, if we are going to do mail-in voting, let's do everything we can to make it so that we know you are the person who's voting. But again, I think the reason we lose elections in Washington State is because we run bad candidates, we run bad campaigns sometimes, or we don't have a strategy.
Or all the above.
Yeah, or all of them combined together in one epic defeat.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
So we can win here in Washington State. We just need to start working together. And the biggest thing I think we need to stop doing is crippling our candidates before we even get to the general. Like the personal attacks against Semi Bird have to stop. Saying that Dave Reichert voted with Nancy Pelosi 90% of the time is just not true.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you count every vote that was unanimous. So I saw this thing that went out saying, look how many times you voted with Nancy Pelosi. Most of those votes were almost unanimous in the House. I mean, so like they all came together and agreed, okay, we need to do
That's like
this.
naming a post office, right?
You know?
Where everybody votes on it and they're like, sure, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's we just need to be careful and stop attacking our candidates before they get there. Either Semi Bird or Dave Reichert is going to be the nominee, and we need to get behind them 110%. Because if we
agreed.
don't, Bob Ferguson is our next governor, and I'm telling you right now, we may end up having a supermajority in the House and Senate too.
That
Because if
never
Bob
goes away.
Ferguson, yeah, if Bob Ferguson cleans the House,
Hmm.
I mean, like he eats our candidate's lunch, the coattails from that will spiral down because we've already got a top of the ticket problem.
Yep.
Donald Trump, I'm sorry, is not going to win Washington State.
Nope.
It's just not going to happen,
Right.
no matter how much you want it to happen.
Or
I mean,
Jeb Bush, to be fair, Jeb Bush or Nikki Haley or whomever wouldn't
Mitt
win
Romney
Washington
lost
State
the
either.
state badly. Mitt Romney lost very bad. John McCain lost very bad.
Absolutely.
George
Bush
W. Bush
very
lost
bad.
twice. The first time he came close in 2000.
Yeah.
That's the closest we've been. I mean, we haven't had a close one since 2000, and we still lost 2000. But
Right. Bob Dole didn't do well.
Nope.
Bush Senior didn't do well. I think the last
Reagan.
Republican president was Reagan, and that was what, Reagan 84.
Mm-hmm. I think Bush won it in his first election.
Oh, okay, maybe.
So his first election, I think that was the last time Washington State went Republican. His second election, it did not.
Right.
It went to Bill Clinton, and it stayed.
Right.
It stayed blue after that.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, so we've got some things to work on. Everybody, my advice: work together, do what you can to make sure you defeat Bob Ferguson, and please start donating to your candidates because they need the money.
100%.
So, Chris, always great to see you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Sir.
I feel like there's more to talk about, so we'll have to probably do a part 2 sometime.
Let's do it. I'm game. You know me.
All right. Sounds good. Well, I'll chat with you later, Chris. Thank you.
Sounds good, man. Yep. Have a good night.